Okay, my wonderful friends, this is going to be a discussion about what can be seen, what can be proven, what is just speculation. Let's just start with the fact that I have been studying mud fossils for many years, and I believe I understand the chemistry, and if you look it up, it's called nucleophilic substitution, and that happens in wet aqueous solutions, watery basically, and where something is entombed that was a biological creature that had biology which is organic, which is never ever stable while you're alive. Once a creature dies, this biology either rots away and gets invaded and eaten and whatever happens to it, or it gets preserved in some manner or another. Well, the manner that they have never understood is nucleophilic substitution, which means the organic molecules in here, which basically find some manner of transition metals. In this case, it's primarily ferrous oxides and all in that area because it's reddish, and that's what blood is, and blood has invaded this and turned the tissue into mud, literally red mud. That's it. Now this area here is tendon. A lot of places tendon will be very white, and it'll be really totally different than the red, but that's in a different entombment. This was basically in a wet, also extremely red, muddy area that just encapsulated, so everything turned red and muddy as a process of stabilization. However, the anatomy does not change. This is the key. If you look at this circle here, just take a look at that. Now take your time. That circle is right underneath this tendon, and it locked itself into a shoulder or to a knee or whatever it was. I had a doctor telling me, see, oh yeah, I know exactly what that is. Well, I forgot what he told me. But the muscle, the tendon's right here. Here's the tendon. It runs from here, from the bone, which it anchors into. It anchors in, and this is glue. I've seen this, and you're going to see it in a microscope. Unbelievable. And then it turns into this fibrous, extremely tough times a bazillion tendon. And that then transitions at this point into muscle. Then the muscle turns into bundles, and they have what they call, well, I call them anyway, abrupt transitions. And because I can see them. I can see where the mineralization changes as it goes forward out and then turns into extremely red muscle. Now, what this particular creature was, I have no clue. That is a pretty good size shoulder or knee or whatever, so it's probably a little bigger than a normal, if it was a human. I have no idea what kind of creature it is. I haven't done any DNA tests on this. My other ones are DNA tested and certified as human beings. And some of them are, two of them are gigantic. So we have to take a whole new look. But now I'm going to show you these fibers in the microscope. And I'm going to tell you what they are. And then I'm going to show you how big they can be on Earth. And you're just absolutely going to blow your mind right out of your head. Alright, if you're squeamish, look away, because this is going to be what happens when a body, fluids come out of a body. And here it is. And that was a body that somebody died, nobody knew about it, and they started to decompose, and the fluids just flow away. They call it effluent. Now, obviously there's some flow down this way, so that the tilt of the floor was like this. Now, and of course they removed the body. Now, I have other ones to show the body in totality, and it's nasty. But this is normally red and black. And let me show you in a mud fossil the lungs, because that's in the lungs. You have red and black because it is the lungs where you transfer oxygen into the deoxygenated blood. So you're going to have both sides in the lungs. And I'll show you a mud fossil lung right now. All right, the reason I'm showing you this is because I am going to show you body parts that are in the transition between the red blood and the blacks. And this is a mud fossil lung that is starting to deteriorate. And here's when they put a little water on it. This is my friend Gary Evans over in, I believe he's in England. And this is where the red blood starts to infiltrate. Its oxygen starts to take over. Anyway, you got deoxygenated, oxygenated, and in between these are all the blood vessels, alveoli, and all that stuff. And then within a week or so, a couple of weeks I guess it was, this is what happened to it. Once they dry out after these conditions, it depends, in the salt flats, in the salt, long duration salt entombment, it seems to break the bonds of everything, so that when they finally dry out, they just fall apart. And I imagine the salt content in the air is extremely high. And they just turn into dust. And then literally turn into mud. That's what mud is. Alright, the reason I was showing you the different colors is because we're going to be looking at Baalbek, and they say it was not built by giants, it was built to keep them out. Now this is a place called Matrix Wisdom, and it says the colossal ruins at Baalbek show evidence not just of a past super civilization, but also of a race of giants that once existed in the Middle East. I agree with all that. And let's see what they have to say. Now, this is Fair Use Act. I'm just going to comment on their statements because I'm going to show you what nobody knows what these Baalbek stones were made of, and I do, and I can show them to you, and I think I maybe already have, but I will show them to you here. Now, giant creatures literally made the earth. Watch.
Civilizations. There are cranes in the world that can lift such a stone, but cannot move and carry the stone simultaneously.
Now, you know that I show this and I say these are layers of tissue, not just simply stratifications of sediment.
And the idea that wooden rollers would have been used is ridiculous. So, who did this work and when?
All right, this is why I showed you the colors. This is blood. That's blood. This is the black blood, which is the vein blood, and it's draining down out of the vein, which we can see. And veins attract, the vein blood attracts lichen. I've always been talking about this. And the red blood normally has moss. That's what I find. And these are individual fibers of tendon. That's right. If I didn't show them to you yet, I will. But I have a specimen here that is identical to these slabs, and they're all individual, and every one of them had to move on its own independently when this creature was alive, and it was alive at one time. And these flat little places glue right up to a strip here, just like you're seeing. And there's here and here and here and here and here. These they pulled out of here already, and then they built steps up so that they could work on the other ones. Now, who moved them? I would say they'd have to be giants. And these had to be done not long after the flood, but long enough where they were stable enough to be moved, because they would be wet and soft. They'd be like clay almost for, well, I don't know, 100 years or more probably. And then as they dried out, they would become stone. That's exactly what happens. All right, what I am claiming is that these are identical to the stones that are at Baalbek, and they have an exact flat spot where they break off, and they are infused with a little tiny bit of blood that runs down the center of them, and that was what was gushing out the sides. They are absolutely, totally separate. They glue totally flat as a pancake. That's why you see all around the earth, they got these flat plateaus of fibers like this, and there's a lot of them I could show, but I'm not going to get deep into that now. But this is from this, what we're looking at right there, came off of here, of course, in the microscope. And again, that's the bone emplacement, that's the tendon, and what we're looking at, that's the glue area, and then it runs into the muscle. And then the muscle breaks off in these bundles right at the end. You see them all fiber and stratified? Those are what they call sarcomeres. I got every bit of evidence to present, and I could show you actually blood in here. If I wet this, blood will go just like that. It just loves to be hydrated. So, and I show this all the time. Well, hold on one second. I'll show you something right now that will knock your socks off. Watch. All right, I'm not exactly sure what this is in the body, but it was in the body of a creature, and this gnarly looking thing is the tendon entasis that's holding down. They're all over the place, and I broke one apart here. The entasis goes down in there. That's, if I was on the other side, we would see that gnarly looking stuff. Between the layers of tendon, there's a layer of, what do they call it? It's bloody. It's a slurpees, small leucine-rich proteins. Leucine-rich proteins are bloody, and this is right here. That's blood. If I put a little water on that, it's going to turn red in about, I don't know, a minute or two. And I mean, nice and red. And it's been here for 10 years, so they only have so much redness in them. But now you can see the black and the red. You see how quick that happened? You see that? I hope you can. But that's the bloody red Slurpee that tendon would have slid on, but I broke it off. That's the emplacement portion right there, that black spot. But it's always you're gonna see black and red. And if we could see down where it went through, you can see some of the gnarly looking stuff right now as it starts to take on some of the, in the microscope you could see. But if you were on the other side of that, this is what you would see. Exactly like that. Because they anchor. These are anchors. And they anchor tight, and that's the blood supply coming in. I scratched it all out of there. But this is it's a tendinous, tough, strappy piece that ran to something. I don't know what, like I say, this is nucleophilic substitution. But blood and the transition metals are the facilitator of that reaction to make everything solid. So the blood quite often is not affected. I know it sounds crazy, but like even up here, this one here, if I put a little water on that, that's going to turn red too. Because that is nothing more than blood. Up in that area, it's all bloody. And that serviced the tissue below. I don't know if that'll look red to you or not with this light, but believe me, if I scratch that off and put it in the microscope, you'd see this. Anyway, what we're looking at is biology, blood, fibers, and exactly the same thing that's at Baalbek, which was alive at one time. Those stones were inside of some gigantic creature. And then there was a terrible flood on the earth. Velikovsky recorded everything. And at that point, all of these bodies were laying all over the earth of giant creatures, and they carved them just exactly like they did at Petra. I will show you that too. All right, any anatomist can tell you that that is muscle fiber, and these are the blocks of the muscles, and they come up with these striations between them because they all have to move back and forth. They call them sarcomeres. Now, they carve this right out of the wet, decaying, drying flesh, apparently. And where do you see what's inside of Petra the treasury? Now, this was carved right out of these giant walls of flesh. Now, that is inside Petra. That's inside what I just showed you. What is that? This is all biology. This is all layers of tissue. That's blood coming out of there. The exact same type of blood-looking thing that's in the end of the Baalbek stones. Now don't forget, this is what I'm saying, is each individual fiber that's at Baalbek, and it comes to a gluey spot here, and there is a little bit of red blood that invests into the center, which everything has to be fed with some form of nutrition. Now, here's what it is at Baalbek. You see that? That's where the blood, the red blood went into it to service the tissues down inside. And that's the black and that's the red. You're always going to have the two together, as I showed in those decomposition pictures. All right, this is exactly what I showed you with mine. I had them coming straight across the same way, and they bumped right up. They're stacked in big bundles, not just one on top of the other. They're big bundles, but they're just as flat as a pancake. And then there's a separation between them that had a slippery synovial sheath, so that all of these things could move back and forth. And that's why you see this little offset. They were sort of in a movement this way. Now the other thing is pay attention to this little slurpy area in the corners. The corners are not going to be like the flat spots. The corners are going to have the slippery action going more, and that's why you're seeing more bleed off of that particular area. That is not as solid as the other parts. And then at the very ends, you know that the blood came in to service the whole thing, because again, every bit of biology in your body, except perhaps your enamel on your teeth, is in a state of instability. It wants to continuously give and take molecules, dumping waste, taking in nutrients, nutrition, all that stuff. Now, that's the result if they were just absolutely astronomically giant, and they were. All right, here's the Baalbek stones. Think about this for a second. That stone is completely separated from the stone below. They're not chopping this out from, and this was a totally different substance than this and the stone below. And it is the sliding, slurpy division between these fibers. It's basically as simple as that. These creatures were absolutely enormous. And there's the bloody field at the end. This is called Dreams Time. And there's your red and your black, and you know, it's very hard not to understand this now. All right, everybody wonders how they made these walls. Well, they cut these chunks from a decaying creature, and sometimes they got little bone bits with bloody different types of materials other than tendon. They wanted tendon primarily. This, I think, is mostly like muscle, or look at how bad that one is up there. Normally, if you see this surface, it's tendon, and the black blood grows the lichen. The red blood usually grows moss, and moss has a lot of roots and stuff. It really digs in. And then you have the tendon wall bumps, which are these bumps that bump off them, and they are from tendon emplacements. There's a strap that runs across. Anyway, there's so much to look at, and we're going to do it. That's a tendon that broke. They were normally straight up, and you snap them at the top, and that's what's called an abrupt transition wrinkle zone. And it drops back and it shakes like this, and then it goes straight again. And guess where there's one that's pretty good size. Okay, once again, get me an anatomist, not a geologist, because they just, oh, this is some kind of lava extrusion. Well, this is the wrinkle zone of a giant foot. These are the calcaneus heel bones, and this is exactly the structure that wraps around, the tendons wrap around your lower part of your foot. This is the abrupt transition. The tendons themselves are under tension. When they snap, they zip, make this little wrinkle. Get an anatomist, get a biologist, get a geologist, get a chemist. And I cover all those bases, so all of this is understood in my world. In their world, it's one against the other, and nobody knows anything about anything, really, to be honest with you. All they have is opinions that they make up some kind of a story to support. And that's all it is. It's nothing but opinion now. I show factual evidence. This is limestone. Let me just show you what tendons are made out of. I know this is extremely shocking, but it is true. Tendons from giant creatures are the same as the tendons in us. And this is what a tendon structure is. You got a big tendon, and it comes down into more and lower, and you get into the fibrils. And that's these. These are the little bits and pieces that end up embedding into bone or muscle or whatever, and then the tendon runs out to pull your leg or your calf muscle or your shoulder or whatever the types of things I was just showing you. Tendons are the transition between the anchor, which is wherever these anchor into, and then the puller, which is a muscle normally. So they have abrupt transitions, and they break right just like this, abruptly. And it's a matter of nucleophilic substitution that creates whatever these turn into. Sometimes they can turn spectacular, like up in Iceland or Greenland or places like that. Unbelievable. By the way, this is something else needs to be talked about. They had machines back then when all this stuff was wet after the giants died. Where these machines went, I have no idea. But I can tell you what, these are tire tracks. And this is like tank treads. And they were up, like say, a foot or two, so you could drive on a road with the tires. But when you hit this wet stuff, it would sink in, and then the tank treads would take over. And they had a machine, this must have been some gigantic machine, that came over here and cut these slabs. Then they moved them in the back and placed them where, you know, everybody says, ooh, how did they do these walls? Well, they were wet when they cut it. They're obviously wet. No question whatsoever. This thing was in wet, gooey stuff. No question whatever. These things are cut somehow. I would say it came over and cut them up like this, because this is the same material, and you can cut it into chunks like putty, basically. It's like clay almost. However, it does have some mineralized parts. I understand the mineralized parts. They're in the same stuff that I showed you of mine. As above, so below. That's exactly what the truth. And even in the Gospel of Thomas, which is a hidden text in the Nag Hammadi, and the Gospel of Thomas was Doubting Thomas, I think it's 56 and 80. If you look that up, look up Gospel of Thomas, and look up 56 and 80. He said, whoever discovers the earth discovers a body and a corpse. And that's exactly what it is. This is all biology, my friends. I can't account for it, but it's time to start looking into it a little deeper and to not just laugh at people that want to look into it.